So when I work with people, the thing that I think people find really sort of relieving to hear at the beginning is like, this is super common.
Yeah. Katie, my question to you is, what is OCD?
So OCD is a disorder that comes about when people misinterpret commonplace thoughts, images, urges, sensations, and they usually deem them to be somehow bad or wrong. And then they spend a lot of time and effort trying to get rid of them or cancel them out or avoid them in some way, and they get stuck in that cycle.
So that can manifest, I'm imagining, in lots of different ways. I know some people have counting patterns, some people have checking patterns. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, so what you're describing, like counting patterns, checking patterns, that's what you would call a compulsion. So the thing that you do to try and get rid of the discomfort that you feel when you maybe have a thought or an urge or an image. So with a counting pattern, it would be like, if I get to 9, uninterrupted, then it will be okay. But if you get interrupted, you have to start again. Similar things like cleaning. But the other thing that people do a lot of that people often don't realise with OCD, well, counting obviously usually goes on in the head, but there's lots of other things that people do just sort of internally that no one can see. And often those are the people that get missed as having OCD because no one sees them like washing their hands or repeating actions or whatever, but they're actually doing things in their head, like replacing a bad thought with a good thought. So those are all the sort of compulsions that you get.
So it all starts with a thought. So it could be, would you call that an intrusive thought?
So that's what they're usually called, intrusive thoughts, but really they're just thoughts. Or it doesn't have to be a thought, it can be an image, it could be an urge, it could be a sensation, so it could be something physical, like a little twitch or something. So it starts with that, and the thing about those is they're totally common, we all have them. But when you have OCD, or you would misinterpret that as meaning something. So like a typical one is like, if you imagine like standing at the top of a tall building or on a bridge or something, it's quite common, lots of people have had that experience probably, where you might think, oh, what if I jumped?
Yeah, right? Been there.
Right, exactly. So it's quite normal to have these, what I call like random thoughts, right? Everybody has them. But if you have a tendency to think that whatever goes on in your head is really super important, then what you might start doing is like, oh, well, why did I think that? Why did I think, what if I jump? Does that mean I want to jump? Am I suicidal? Do I need to like take care of myself? Do I need to look out for whether I've got any other signs of being suicidal? And then you start to monitor yourself. Then you might go, right, I can't go anywhere that I could accidentally kill myself, or, so it spirals into a cycle. So the thing about the idea of intrusive thoughts is it's kind of shorthand for thoughts that are completely normal, but people find intrusive because they're uncomfortable for them.
Right.
But obviously, the idea of intrusive thoughts is people end up thinking there's some kind of special thought that is particular to OCD, whereas actually they're just thoughts. And in treatment, that's one of the things you're doing, is you're trying to get people to come back to that idea that it's just a thought.
Yeah.
Like we can all have weird thoughts or images or sensations that don't really have to mean anything.
They can just pass us by and then we carry on. But it's the getting stuck bit, which is then leading to the compulsion bit. So there's a discomfort, which is sort of a build-up, a discomfort that builds, and you need to have some sort of release by counting, checking, or doing whatever that. What's that called? Is it a safety mechanism, a coping mechanism?
Yeah, so you can call it any of those things, or a compulsion. It's what you do to try and alleviate what you think the problem is, which is the thought or the image or the urge that's come in. You're trying to alleviate the discomfort that's come with that by doing those things. But as you said, it's the cycle, because the more you do it, although you're trying to solve the problem, but actually it ends up creating more of them.
Yes. And with those thoughts that then end up spiralling, let's call them intrusive thoughts, if someone has OCD, do they get stuck? Is there a recurring one that comes back to them, or can it differ? Can they have many different intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, either. You could have one thought that kept coming and got stuck, or you could have all sorts of different ones. And that's another one of the things that's really important, because if you focus on just treating one thought, then someone could get better at not minding that thought and not doing the behaviours and the compulsions with that thought. But actually what we need is for them to learn how to generally deal with anything that pops up in their head.
And this can be massively debilitating, having OCD.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people don't necessarily realise how debilitating it can be. I mean, you can get to, sometimes people get to a point where they're hospitalised, or, where they're simply not able to function, where they can no longer work. It can be incredibly time-consuming, obviously anxiety-provoking, but yeah, it can completely stop people from functioning. But at the same point, people can have it relatively mildly and be able to function, and obviously everything in between.
Talking about it, I'm imagining alleviates it somewhat, because it's quite a lonely place to be, having those thoughts and assuming you're the only person that has those thoughts that then spiral and spiral.
I think absolutely that's right. So when I work with people, the thing that I think people find really sort of relieving to hear at the beginning is like, this is super common, right? And actually hearing that you're not the only person with this, because exactly that, so many people keep it quiet and don't tell anyone. And then a lot of people think that there's something really like wrong with them in terms of like their brain's somehow broken or they're going mad. And it's like, oh, that's just OCD, we can deal with that.
What might cause it? Is there any particular life experience or trigger that might mean someone develops OCD?
So there is evidence that it can develop sort of post-traumatically. You also see rises after like big life changes, like women having children, for example. But we don't really know exactly what causes it as such. It's probably a bit of a cocktail of things like genetics and environment. If maybe one of your parents has a tendency towards being quite obsessional about certain things, you might develop it from that. So there's also your personality. It depends on lots of different things.
And does it come along often with other, I don't know if I'm using the right language, comorbidities, where there's something else attached to it, whether it's Tourette's or certain tics? Is that something that's quite common with OCD?
Yeah, I mean, you could just have OCD sort of plain and simple on its own. Yeah, Tourette's, tics, other anxiety disorders, so generalised anxiety disorder. You see OCD is quite common with people with autism. So you do often see it with other things, yeah.
Is it possible to overcome OCD?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that you still can read a lot sometimes online and things, people talk about it being like a chronic problem, i.e. like you just have to live with it. And I would say that is really misleading, because part of the way of getting rid of it is learning to live with it. And then the more you learn to live with it, the less it becomes a problem. So it becomes a non-problem, and therefore you've got rid of it.
So is that the line of thinking, whatever you resist persists?
Absolutely, yeah.
I like that one.
That is it in a nutshell.